Hi, I am Rachel Meliotis. I'm a senior editor with O'Reilly, and we are here to talk about Objective-C and Cocoa with John Manning and Paris Butfield Addison. They are co-founders of Secret Labs and also co-authors of the forthcoming Learning Cocoa with Objective-C 3rd edition. Welcome.
Hello.
First question. How do you get the most out of Objective-C?
Well, Objective-C kind of has a reputation for being a very verbose language, and for people who come from a more succinct language like Perl, then that can be seen as kind of a challenge. But I think that it's at its best when you embrace that verbosity. So if you learn to write methods that have long descriptive names, not overly verbose, but succinct and descriptive enough to be able to get the most out of it, then it's really at its best.
Very good.
Also, while it's very much a compiled language, it helps to think of it like a scripted language sometimes and sort of embrace that dynamic nature when you're coding for it. So, yeah, think of it like a scripted language, even though it's compiled.
Okay. And sort of a flip side, what are its limitations?
Well, Objective-C kind of has a really long history behind it. It was developed for the most part for the Next machines, and so a lot of every single important class is prefixed with the letters NS, so that's a kind of indication on how far back it goes. And that can mean that it takes a bit of effort to get into its world, so it takes a bit of time to understand why it does certain things.
Its biggest limitation is also really that it's only useful for iPhone or Mac development. Not many popular languages are that specific to a platform.
So for someone starting out new in this area, are there any best practices with the language that you can suggest?
Actually, one of the first things I'd suggest to anyone who's looking at getting into Objective-C development is to check out the videos Apple publish from their developer conference. Every single year they run this. For the last few years, they actually put up all the recordings of the videos, and so it's the perfect first place to understand not just the basics, but also the deeper level stuff.
The other best practice is obviously make lots of simple apps and actually release them. You cannot learn languages that are such quirky languages in many ways without actually making apps. It doesn't have to be the big app you've always dreamt of making, but if you make lots of little apps, you'll get the hang of the quite quirky environment pretty quickly.
That makes sense. What do you think about the new updates that came out this past June?
Fantastic and long past due. So one of the biggest features they added was a thing called ARC, which stands for Automatic Retain Counting, or Reference Counting, and it basically means you get to treat the language as though it's garbage collected, even though it's not, so you get the best of both worlds. As well as that, they added nicer syntax for working with primitive constructs like arrays and dictionaries. Previously they were very, very verbose, but now there's just nice support for like square brackets for indexing arrays and such.
So next question is, can you guys help me understand sort of how Cocoa and Objective-C are intertwined?
So Cocoa and also the iPhone version of Cocoa, which is Cocoa Touch, is really, really deeply embedded in the language. Pretty much every single design decision that was made recently in the language was driven by features demanded of it by the platform that it runs on. And so if you want to learn Objective-C, then really you end up learning about Cocoa and Cocoa Touch.
They're rarely used apart, but realistically, Objective-C is the language, while Cocoa is the framework or the umbrella of frameworks that you can get all the nice stuff out of. So you're never really using them separately, and then it's sort of confusing to some people because they always sort of exist as this one thing that you can talk to.
Okay. So final question for you guys. When developers finally, find it's time to go to the store and they're submitting their app, do you have any tips for that?
The number one tip that I can think of would be a developer needs to think about the application in the same way that Apple's going to be thinking about the app. Apple puts the App Store on the phones as a way to improve the selling power of the phones. It's a feature that they advertise as a reason to go and buy an iPhone. And so if you have put your application into the App Store, or rather you've submitted it for consideration, then it helps to think about it in those terms. Think about whether or not this application will actually make the iPhone be a better product for Apple to sell. It's kind of a foreign way to think about it, because usually if you come from other platforms, you think, this is my app, I'm selling it, and I'm the main person involved here. But really, from Apple's perspective, it's not.
That is very good.
Yeah.
All right, well, that is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.